Good morning, everybody. Chasten, welcome to beautiful, always sunny Rancho Mirage.
Thank you. I have been looking forward to this for so long, and I feel like I cursed myself.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for bringing the Michigan weather. But this is much warmer than Michigan, so I'll take it.
Yeah, well, it's hopefully going to be sunny by tomorrow, so apologies on behalf of the Coachella Valley, but hopefully we get some better weather for you tomorrow. And I thought I would start off by just asking you a softball, because I really appreciate that when interviewers do that for me. When are you going to run for president of the United States?
God, never.
Never.
No, thank you.
Okay, kidding aside, here's my real softball, because I love this story in the book. Tell us about the name Chasten and why you're named Chasten.
Oh, well, it's actually a bad story, I feel like. I was always told that there was this play with this King Chasten. My mom had, I feel like, devised a really intricate story, which is maybe where I got my storytelling from. It's all a lie. I have done so much research. I cannot find this play. I cannot find any reference to this character. So I don't know what she was thinking or what she was saying, but she just pulled it out of somewhere.
And you found there's a line, an Arthurian ballad.
Correct.
Yeah, share what that is.
Well, it's King Chasten Thy Wife, which is, a lovely thing to be named after. Pronunciation's different, though.
Right. So pronounced Chasten, everybody. Yes. For the record, it's Chasten.
It was a fun one growing up with.
So I want to talk about your childhood, because you grew up in Traverse City, Michigan, which is, and I have the stats here, 95% white.
I heard a whistle. Is someone from Traverse City?
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Fantastic.
All right, that's great.
I love it.
So 95% white.
They probably know my parents. I'm sorry. It's just that kind of town. No? Okay, well, thank God. 'Cause this is not being live streamed. Okay.
Yeah.
Or is it? I don't know.
So 95% white.
Yeah.
Extremely conservative. You wrote in the book about the need to blend to survive. Yeah. And I love the lines that you have about why you felt culturally in such a conservative area at the time that identifying as a Republican meant, quote, quickly conveying a set of values, acceptable values to other people, but it also meant that I could avoid having to figure out what my values actually were.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your childhood and that pressure to blend in as a kid?
Yeah, so Traverse City was much more conservative growing up. It's getting there. I love it. We moved our family back there, so I'm committed to being part of the renaissance of Traverse City. But growing up in Traverse City, it very much felt like you had to be one type of person. You could only be one type of boy. You had to be a very, outwardly masculine boy. I was in 4-H, so I was raising cows. People would drive their pickup trucks and their snowmobiles to school, and it just sort of felt like you had to either conform or you'd get picked on. And so I found myself constantly evaluating my worth based on what other kids thought of me, compared to all of what I felt like were these standards I had to meet. So I wore these terrible Wrangler jeans and big American Eagle belt buckles, like the eagles flying over the American flag. And I was just trying to blend in order to say I'm just like you, please leave me alone. And because my family wasn't very political, we never talked about politics. Politics always sort of felt like something that happened far away in Washington and didn't really ever change life in Michigan. I didn't know much about the difference between being a Republican and a Democrat until it was in high school when George Bush came through Traverse City, and I took one of his stickers and I put it on my minivan that I drove to school. And I got called out for it. A friend in school said, "I thought you would know better. I thought you were different." And I didn't really know what she meant because I had never really been put in a position in life to examine what my values were and what I truly believed, and also to sort of look at the world through the lens of politics. And I mean, I was 17. I'll give myself a little bit of grace, but that's just how I felt like I could survive. Going to the county fair in 4-H, it definitely felt like I was always the outcast, the oddball, and so I always tried to succeed and put myself forward. And so I thought if I won the trophies with the cows on top, then everyone would ignore the fact that I was gay and that I was a really good showman, or my dad, my family owns a small business, and it felt like everybody knows my parents. I'm just going to keep looking at you as if you know my parents. It's that kind of town. Like, we always used to make fun of Dad when he'd drive us to school because we'd be a half an hour late because he'd run into somebody at the gas station and then talk to them for half an hour. And so it always felt like there was that magnifying glass on you, and everybody knew Terry and Sherry's boy. And I always felt like that secret just had to be concealed, and the way to conceal it was to blend in with everybody else. So I'll pretend I'm a Republican. I'll pretend I'm a cowboy. That's why the chapter is titled "I Am Not a Cowboy." I'll try to be the best angler. I'll try to help my dad with the family business and, lift the big rocks and do the hard work in the sun so that he doesn't ask me any question that might reveal about, who I truly am.
Also one hell of a bowler.
I was a good bowler, which is a real sport. And I do have the varsity jacket still.
So
I don't know why you're laughing. That wasn't a joke.
So the pressure to conform, as you write about in the book, and I think as a lot of LGBTQ people here, and certainly I could relate to, that pressure included a lot of targeted bullying.
Yeah.
And you have some very graphic stories about what that meant, being pushed into lockers, having your face pushed on the ground by kids in school. Yeah. But I also was struck by the sympathy that you had for the kids that were doing the bullying. You write a line that says that you knew that they were hurting too. And I wonder if you could share just a little bit about that experience of being in the closet. Yeah. And how you were able to get through it and the advice that you would give to LGBTQ kids and their parents today too.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote the book, this new young adult adaptation for younger me. I was hoping that this might be the book for somebody else. The book I wish I would have had in 8th grade. And I just found a story like this that would have made me aware that there were other people like me out in the world, and that they too had been through some of those struggles and those conflicts with their family or their country or their surroundings. But I also really wrote the book for my parents and other parents like my parents, a book I wish my parents would have read when I was in middle school. I wish they would have known how much I was hurting and how so laser focused I was on blending in and conforming to the world I thought they wanted me to live in and the person they wanted me to be, rather than focusing on childhood. It's one of my biggest senses of pain about my childhood, is that I felt like I spent so much of my childhood focused on surviving and blending in, and I never really got to enjoy a lot of it. And so I hope that this book is helpful for other families and parents, because you can't change your kid, but people can change. And my parents are now such great advocates, but it took a lot of learning and unlearning, and I hope this book might be one of those tools for other families. I feel like I've swayed a little bit from your question, but I think so much about the fact that my life could have been so different had my parents just had a 10-second conversation with me when I was in 6th grade or middle school. Had my parents just sat me down and said, I know it's really awkward when we talk about our feelings, but we're a very Catholic family. But we love you unconditionally, and we will always love you unconditionally, whether you're straight or gay, whether you want to play on the baseball team like your brothers, or whether you want to, go to theater school. We will love you, no matter what. And had they just told me that, then I could have just lived. I could have just existed and enjoyed my childhood and had known. I was so terrified that I would lose them, that the moment they found out, it would all be over. And I was convinced either that the closet was going to kill me or somebody else was. And had we had that 10-second conversation, it would have gone so differently. So I hope that this book is one of those tools for other families, grandparents, parents, godparents, and teachers especially. I taught middle school, and I very much had middle school teachers in mind when I wrote this book. That's why there are already reading questions for you in the back of the book. Half the curriculum unit's done.
Can you recount the story that you relay in the book about you go overseas to Germany, and you're able to see America from abroad, your own community from abroad, and it gives you this perspective. You come back and you come out. Can you share that story?
Yeah. One day in high school, my German teacher, because I took German like the cool kids did, and she talked about the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange Program, which is a fully funded scholarship to go spend your senior year abroad in Germany, and it felt like the golden ticket to me. It was a way out of Traverse City, and it wasn't so much that I wanted to live in Germany, I'd wanted out so bad. And I was a good student, and I had good grades, and I had taken German for 4 years, and it felt like I had the whole TED Talk ready for my parents, and they absolutely did not want me to go, and so it was my first act of rebellion. I forged my dad's signature on the application, and I got an invitation to interview for it, and I got it, and my parents did ultimately let me go, and it changed my life. It was where I kissed a boy for the first time and definitely realized that I was gay. And I just got to examine my world and my country and my place in both of those places. And then I came home, and I went right back to the same town and the same people, the same opinions and prejudices, and went right back into the closet. And just felt like it just felt so crushing. Because I finally tasted that freedom. I felt like I was finally being authentically me and answering some of those questions I had held on to for so long. And then I just ran. I couldn't do it. I couldn't stay home. I knew I was going to lose them. I was convinced that once I told them, I was gay, that I thought they would think the Europeans had corrupted me or something. So that's when I decided to run away from home. But Germany it came at the right time. And it was a rough year, and in so many ways, academically, but God, did it change my life and just show me that this is who I am, it's who I'm meant to be. I was okay to be me. I made friends who were okay with it. I had this very lovely, blunt German friend. One day she was like, "Something's wrong with you." And I was like, I've been a little depressed lately, and I think I might be bi. and she was like, "It's okay to be bi, but it's also okay to be gay too." And she said it so matter-of-factly. And I was like, I think I am gay. And she's like, "That's great." And that was it. And it just, for 17 years, I thought like all the walls were going to come crumbling down when you said it out loud. It's the first time I said it out loud, and then it was like, "Let's go get ice cream." It was so. It's how it should be, right? And to feel that warmth and love from your friends and your community was life-saving for me. But then I had to go back to Michigan.
Right. I love the line, quote, "You might just be gay."
You might just be gay.
Yeah. You might just be gay.
Yeah.
So you talk about the struggles in your 20s too, beyond, of course, just being closeted. But I think one thing that struck me, and I think a lot of millennial readers and Gen Z readers, are the academic, the financial, the personal struggles hitting all at the same time, whether it was with school or jobs or student loans, which you have some great lines about. But I think
I thought you were going to say, "Which you have some great student loans."
which you have.
I do, thank you.
Which you're still.
They're fantastic.
Which you're still struggling to repay. But can you talk about, I think of all of them, because you have great stories about all of them hitting you simultaneously. What do you think of those struggles that you write
I'm so glad
about?
you enjoyed those struggles. No, I just wanted to write about them in the first book and touch about them in the second a little bit, because I think so many of us in our generation and in many generations were sort of sold a false promise of the American dream. And the American dream to us was, you're going to graduate high school, you're going to go get your 4-year degree, and then you're going to get the white picket fence, and to the people who were espousing that, the wife, and the 2.5 kids, and you're gonna, that's the American dream. And I went to college, and I got the degree, and I was working at Starbucks and teaching and trying to make ends meet, and it was really rough. And I feel like so many kids in our generation were just told, like, go do it, and I wasn't ready for school. I should not have gone to college, and I wanted to be really honest about that in the book because I was just pushed into it. I came home from Germany, I ran away from home, I wasn't talking to my family, I had very few friends that knew I was out, I was sleeping in the back of my car. There's no reason why I should have been taking a full course load at the community college. But I was being told that, like, if you want to get out, if you want to survive, if you actually want to make it, you got to go to school, you got to get that degree. I should have taken a break. I should have taken a beat and figured out who I was and gotten to a safe space. And it's okay to take a break. It's okay to work or, explore a trade or, study abroad is great for me. Do something. And I wanted to talk about that in the book for other kids who are thinking about their place in the world and what they want to do with their life. There's no reason why a 17-year-old should be signing on a dotted line that they're going to take out student loans when they're just trying to figure out, like, where their next meal is going to come from, and if the paycheck's going to add up at the end of the day. I talk a lot about my mom's diagnosis with cancer and how that was sort of a really eye-opening experience into the medical system in this country and how messed up it can be when you have really hard-working people like my folks. My dad would take to, like, fixing lawnmowers and selling them, on Craigslist or out in the front yard to try to, like, get an extra $50 just to pay medical bills. And all of these things were sort of happening at once. My mom was diagnosed with cancer when I was 17. I came out that summer. I turned 18, and so all these things were sort of swirling around me, and what gave me a very close look at how politics can make our lives better and easier and safer, or how policy can make those things worse.
Right.
Harder.
So I want to fast forward a little bit because you talk about online dating, and
Let's jump from your trauma to dating.
Yeah.
Did you?
Which is also something that a lot of people in their 20s can certainly relate to, and you share some of the challenges of online dating, but the silver lining is that it led you to Secretary Buttigieg.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't know until reading the book the story of how you guys met, and it's kind of a crazy twist of fate.
It's gross, right? It's a really, it's a gross love story. It's a fairy tale. So many bad dates, so many unfortunate boyfriends along the way. I had my heart broken one too many times, and was ready to give up on it all. Weren't we all? And I matched with this guy, Pete, in South Bend, Indiana. I was living in Chicago at the time. I was going to DePaul to get my master's degree. And he cleverly had a photo of him standing behind a podium with his name on it in one of the photos. And so, of course, I Googled him, and it was actually kind of a turnoff. I wasn't really into politics and was like, I don't know about going on a date with a mayor. I don't even think I really knew what mayors did. But then I drove to South Bend, and it was supposed to be a coffee, and then I got stuck in traffic because I wanted to impress him, but I didn't have a car, so I went and rented a car. And I got stuck in traffic, and then it turned into a drink, which turned into dinner, and then he had tickets to a baseball game that night. The South Bend Cubs were playing. And then there were fireworks from the ballpark. We left the game early, and he wanted to show me this light display they had on the St. Joseph River, and then the fireworks went off from the baseball game, and it was just gross. It was just so perfect. It's like you can't write a love story like that, and it was such a lovely date, and I was smitten from the get-go.
And it was such a good date, it made you skeptical, right? At the beginning, you were somewhat.
Well, because you go on a date and people are coming up to him and getting pictures with him and wanting to talk to him about a pothole or something. But when you're on your first date, and you're with the mayor, you're kind of just slowly kind of trying to exit the frame because it would be like, who's this guy? And also this is my date. It was kind of weird. But it was funky. But I kept coming back, and obviously it worked out.
And you guys met. I don't know if folks who read the book know this, but you may not have met had a flight not been delayed for a German student. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So my summer gig in when I wasn't teaching during the school year, my summer gig was working at Chicago O'Hare. I would work for the exchange program that I went on. I would make sure all the exchange students got to their flights okay, and I was staying really late with this kid one night because their flight had been delayed, and was on Hinge, and swiping away, and I matched with Pete, and the rest is history.
So you guys go on a couple dates, and you realize you're starting to like this guy a lot. One of the early questions you ask him is, quote, you're talking about aspirations possibly to run for higher office, and
you are such a prosecutor. You have. He is the most thoroughly prepared moderator I've ever seen, and he has highlighted, and you said, quote.
I was trying to go for Oprah vibes today, but obviously that's not.
I think we'd have to be closer.
That's not been, that's not been successful. Well, first, before I ask you this.
Anyway, go ahead.
So could you tell, you guys did some FaceTime, let me ask you this, because you guys did some FaceTime dates, and I'm like, could you tell you were dating a superhuman polyglot via FaceTime, or did that take a couple days?
No, he's very introverted, and he's very quiet, and he's very purposeful when he talks, and he took such an interest in my life that I had never really felt in a date before, and then I asked multiple dates, where someone like asks so many questions about your life, and was really interested in my family and my studies, and at the time I was doing theater education, and then I was going to get my master's degree. I wanted to write my thesis on theater education, and obviously it comes from a very different world, the political world, so he's just fascinated with that. And I felt like he took a real interest in me. Mm-hmm. It's not off-putting the way his resume is on paper. It was really nice to feel seen for once, that someone like actually cared about you.
And so he's the mayor at the time.
You can say the quote if you want to get it out, Will. I could tell it's just...
We publish it on cross-examination so, quote, come on, you don't really want to run for House, for Senate, for governor one day. Yeah. And he says no. And my question is, did you believe him at the time?
Yeah. Because it wasn't like, ooh, is he going to be a governor one day? For me, it was like, please don't tell me you're going to run for something higher than mayor. 'Cause to me, it was very scary. And he's like, you do a good job, you put your head down, and if you do a bad, especially as mayor, if you do a bad job as mayor, you don't get to run for anything else. And I believed him. And so I actually knocked on doors for his re-election campaign.
Right.
Yeah, as mayor, which is a fun thing to do when you're courting somebody. It's like, I want to hang out with you, but I also have to knock like 400 doors today. Like, okay.
So a ways into the relationship, he ends up running for DNC chair. And then eventually after that, he has a successful, although ultimately he didn't win the DNC chair. I mean, he certainly made a name for himself in that, and he starts having advisors pressure him to actually run for president of the United States. And can you just share the story about when he first asked you that question? Because I thought that was a great anecdote.
Yeah, it's funny. It depends on who you ask. He has different versions of the story. I feel like many times when I get asked about it, it's like this idea that one day it was like, we'll sit down at the dining room table and like, are we running for president or not? And when it was first presented to me, it was like, is it me? Is it on? Yeah. Hey, okay. I was just ready to use my theater voice. It wasn't never like presented to me as a yes or no, and it's slowly sort of, it was like a snowball. But I do remember the first day, it was like, or the first time, it was like, I have some people over and have this conversation about running for president, and I'm pretty sure I laughed at him. I remember folding clothes in the bedroom and was like, what the hell are you talking about? Not that I didn't believe in him, but it just how is your life, happening so fast, and then it just really, it snowballed from there. And it didn't necessarily feel like a runaway train, but the campaign very much took off like they were building the plane as it took off. It just happened so fast. And then it never really felt like you were able to just say, stop, never mind. Not that I felt that way, but it happened so fast.
Right, and it is a lot to run. I can't imagine at that level, especially. And you say yes to him after he says, and I love this quote too. Yeah,
Quote.
Quote. He said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" You write, "Yeah, I have no idea what this means, but yes." And I want to ask you about that looking back now, because there was a huge
I love a prop.
amount of pressure early, and it went from 0 to 60 so quickly. And put so many demands on you personally. I think looking back now, if you had known what the experience would have been like, do you think in that moment you would have said yes?
I don't think I would have said no, but hindsight's fantastic. I wish I would have known all of the things I know now. Would have made it a lot easier, which is why I like talking to people who are running other races, especially their spouses. In order to sort of be helpful, because it's such a drain on your relationship. You really have to fight very hard for your relationship. Pete was telling me this quote. Maybe that somebody else knows this better than I do. There's this quote in Washington that's like, "Stay effective, but stay married." Have you heard this? Really twisted, because these it'll just consume you.
Yeah.
Politics will consume you, and if you don't, especially as a spouse, if you do not fight for one date night every other week, or I will get on a plane and I will fly across the country so I can see him for 45 minutes, at backstage after a speech, and then get on a plane and go somewhere else. I had to do so much work just to try to keep the wheels on the track. Because everyone's job when you're running for president is to get the candidate as far and as fast as possible. And sometimes I felt like the only person that held the rope in trying to bring him back down to earth. And it's a really hard job. So I wish I would have known some of those things that I know now.
And I think in addition to the personal toll in some ways, right, there was also your profile. You guys were the first openly gay couple to make a serious run at the White House in U.S. history. And your own role was not well defined because it had never been done.
Yeah.
And I just want to ask about that experience of having to define it, and what the hardest part of defining that was for you.
Yeah, that was weird. I remember having this moment on the campaign trail where I went home. I left the campaign trail because I wasn't doing well. And I was really struggling with some of the stories coming out, even on our side, and advisors, not of our campaign, but saying that the best thing I could do for Pete would be to go home and hide and let him win. Mm-hmm. And people would say that. They'd pull me in and say, "Don't stop going on TV so much," or just lay low, and then you'll be first gentleman, as if that were the prize that I wanted. And so I went home and I reconvened and I gathered myself around really good friends, and I thought about what I wanted to do and what we could do with this opportunity. And I really readjusted my team on the campaign, my priorities, and I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, and if I'm allowed to toot my own horn for a little bit, I was really good at it. I raised a lot of money. I was a really good fundraiser, and I was a really good surrogate. And I said, if you want me out there, if you want me to do it, here's how I'm going to do it. I don't want to spend every day doing a fundraiser. I want to tour LGBTQ centers. I want to tour mental health care facilities. I want to do teacher roundtables. I want to talk to young people. I want to go to colleges. I want to spend time talking to people. I want to talk to people. And they couldn't say no. So I didn't realize that you have that power too, to say, this is how I want to do it. Because this is what I think, matches my ethos and the ethos of the campaign. And it's also an opportunity to define a role there was no handbook, there was no playbook. And that was alarming because it all of a sudden Pete was just gone. He was gone every day. I barely saw Pete for 2 years. And sometimes when you see those images of us up on a stage waving at an audience, that was the first time I had seen him in days, And then we'd walk back off the stage and I'd kiss him goodbye, and then we'd both get on separate airplanes and go to other ends of the country. And so I realized that I wanted that for him. I wanted him to win. I believed in him, but there was also an opportunity to define that role. And I had to do it in a way that felt authentic to me. I didn't want to pretend to be somebody else. And I also didn't know who to be at first. Because people would say, remind me, how old was Jackie? And I was we're not the same. And it just felt like those are two separate conversations. And they'd say these things to you, well, Michelle did it this way, and Hillary did it that way. And it's but I'm just Chasten from Traverse City. And I'm not, my husband's not running for president, but he is. And it was so wild. But I'm really glad I'm really proud of the work that we did. And I'm proud of myself that was able to do it in a way that felt very authentic to the things that I cared about. And I just wanted to talk about the things that really mattered to me, arts education, mental health, sport, and it was good.
I think even when a campaign goes really well, as yours and Pete's did, there can be a lot of relentless criticism, both from the press, sometimes from donors.
Really? I've never found that.
I'm going to ask a selfish question. How did you deal with it? I mean, what advice do you have to people, and sort of just how did you get through that, dealing with criticism on a campaign? Because especially at the profile and the level that you did it.
Yeah, so it's sort of what I was talking about when I went home and was just if I'm going to do this, you just have to be yourself. Stop. It kind of felt like retreating back to that younger kid, trying to conform to everybody's ideals and trying to be everything for everybody. And it was just just go be yourself. Because if they like you, then they like you. And if they don't like you, well, then stop trying to be liked by everybody. You don't even like everybody. So just be yourself. And that, it was such an important mind shift. But it's, of course, hard, which and that's why I try to spend less time on social media. Mm-hmm. I try to spend more time with my kids. My kids remind me of what is real and what matters. I like to spend quality time with friends and family. I like to talk to people face to face. Because if you go out, there's always somebody on the internet who is ready to cut you down to size. There's always somebody out there who's going to not like you. So if you go hunting for it, you will find it. That's the thing. It's every time you open Twitter, it'll punch you in the face. Mm-hmm. So you have to get to a point where you're why do I keep tapping the punch me in the face button? So you just try to reconfigure your priorities. And so for me, it was really helpful. The kids have been so helpful with that. It's this is real life right in front of me. These are the two people who depend on me the most, who need me the most, who need me to be present. And I value that time much more than the opinions of I don't know, cat hat 24 _ poop emoji. I value the opinions, of my kids and my family and my friends much more. And I do really appreciate having a good group of friends who remind me of who I am. They know me for me. And I think we would all do well if we spent a little less time there and focusing more of our time and attention on the people who love us and the people who are around us.
I think the dynamic that you write about between social media and the press is really interesting, because you talk about how you got some praise online for social media posts that, quote, humanized Pete. That's what the media would kind of write about. And you say in your book that the press itself was often failing to capture a lot of the human aspects of campaigning. Can you talk a little bit about some of those stories that you saw firsthand that the press wasn't reporting on, that I think often gets overlooked in campaigns?
Yeah, that was a really frustrating narrative, but I feel like many candidates face that. But our system just doesn't reward, that sort of look at a candidate. And so I'll do a talk about, why I love him and our relationship and our families. But like Pete never got the opportunity to tell those stories often and be like, wow, you really humanize him. Like, well, you're constantly asking him the same 4 questions over and over and over again. And that was frustrating to me because unfortunately I feel like our press in the ecosystem, and not to like degrade the press at all, that is a really hard job in presidential politics. The system I feel like doesn't necessarily reward lighthearted stories. It's more about like the scoop and who said what and who's blasting who. It's always like this person blasts this person or this person like cuts down this person, and it's really cutthroat out there, and it was a wild trip. And then I'd go out there and tell a story or a funny tweet. I loved tweeting through the campaign back when Twitter was fun, and I liked pulling the curtain back a little bit and allowing people to see behind the scenes of a presidential campaign. But it doesn't necessarily always reward, who the person is or who the family is. It's a little deeper than that.
I like you also write about, I think the stories of LGBTQ young folks or veterans you'd have these gut-wrenching interactions with, and you'd be looking over at the press pool, and sometimes they're getting ready to ask a question of Pete afterwards about a hit that another candidate has made rather than covering the conversation with the veteran, for example.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that happened a lot, where I'd just be watching the gaggle, like the pool, and then he'd be having these like wonderful interactions with somebody, and they'd be talking about what the campaign meant to him or them, or, and they'd all be like over there on their phones. And then like once he was done talking with people, then they'd like all swoop in with their cameras and talk, ask a question that wasn't even related to what anybody in that room had talked about. So it gave me, that view of sort of how that ecosystem works. And then again, gives you the advantage of saying, like, when you do see things written about yourself, understand that that's kind of the ecosystem it's coming from. And they don't truly know who you are.
Right. I think one kind of aspect also that, we talked about some of the criticism, right, that comes with campaigning, but one of the interesting criticisms that you got was that you weren't gay enough at one point. And
this is such a fun walk down memory lane. I'm so glad I came. The weather is great. The questions are lighthearted. I love it here.
This is my prosecutorial background. I just can't.
Why aren't you gay enough? Answer the question.
But I love what you write about this, and I think it is such a great perspective that you had in responding to that kind of criticism, and that you write about in the book. And I just would love if you'd share that, I think, for the folks here in the community, and also, again, for the parents of kids who are facing that pressure.
Yeah, the thing that many need to understand is that, like, the LGBTQIA+ community is not a monolithic community, right? We all come to this community with different experiences and backgrounds, and some people live at the intersection of multiple identities in our community. And so the assertion that I remember when the Time magazine came out, and we didn't know that we were going to be on the cover of Time magazine, and then it just happened. Which, by the way, I would have loved to have known. I would have worn a different outfit, but that's it's neither here nor there. But I remember when I remember the journalist came over, and we did the interview in the living room, and they said, "Can we take a couple of photos?" And we just went outside and snapped a photo in front of our house. And we're like wearing chinos and a dress shirt. And I remember the one article saying, we're basically straight men playing house. Because look at us, we're wearing chinos and button-ups. And to like cut down someone's identity based on how they appear or what they wear does a huge disservice to people who are still trying to find the courage to even crack the closet door open, recognizing that some people never even got the freedom to say those words out loud. I was constantly reminded of that on the campaign trail. People who had lost entire friends to AIDS, to then see a candidate, an openly gay candidate and his husband campaigning, but we're not gay enough because I wore Banana Republic. I don't know. But it does a huge disservice to people who have still lived with that trauma and pain, and to any young kid who's watching the campaign thinking like, well, maybe, is America really going to do this? Is our country really going to go in this direction? Maybe it will get better. So we just have to remember that like our words, there's so much power in our words, what we do, what we say. And to me, that was the important part about the campaign, was being so visible and spending so much time with our community, because I wanted people to know that we cared and we wanted to get better. And yes, acknowledge, by the way, that we are two white gay men who do walk through this world with more privilege than a lot of other people in our community. So help us get better. Help us get it right. And I think so many more politicians would do well if they sat down at the table and listened, rather than went on television or, God forbid, the floor of the House and just started espousing hatred or opinions that are unfounded, especially when it comes to our trans community. I think many people don't know a lot about trans people. They just don't. And to me, that was the goal of going out on the road and meeting with so many people, was saying, I feel like I was the country kid from northern Michigan who just got shot out of a cannon, and here I am, and I want to understand. I want to do better. I want to make sure that however I can use this platform, I am doing it to benefit you. And God, I hope you do that in Congress. Because that's what it's about. It's just, politics can make your life better and easier and safer, or it can make it worse. And that's, at the end of the day, that is what it's about. It's so personal, and it's a moral obligation as a person with a platform and privilege to figure out how I can help.
Only have a couple minutes left, but I want to ask you to just...
Thank God.
One quasi-hardball last. The audience will kill me if I don't ask this, but can you share any insight into whether Pete will make another run for the White House in 2028?
Well, I will give you my very honest answer. I don't care. And I am currently applying for, and here's why I say that, and I don't mean it to be flip. I'm currently working on preschool applications for my kids. And I'm thinking about whether or not we are going to have a democracy in November. And I'm thinking about how it is, I can't even think beyond November. And I'm trying to figure out where to send our kids to school, and meanwhile worrying that somebody else could wind up in the White House and maybe my family won't even be safe enough to send, our kids to those schools. So I'm squarely focused on winning this election, and re-electing our president and saving democracy, because then you can start thinking about whatever else you want to do with your life. But to me, it is so terrifying that life could either get much better or much worse, depending on how our country goes in November. So I will focus on that. But I also really do think Pete could come home for a little bit and just calm down. So I'd love to have him home a little bit longer. But right now I think it's going to take all of us doing as much as we can to save democracy, and then we can start worrying about other things.
My last question.
Yeah.
Best piece of advice for brand new parents that you can offer, given your new kids at home?
Oh, man. Take the help. Just take the help. Take the meal. Let somebody come over and hold the baby so you can shower. It's the best thing. It's the best thing in the world, being a parent. I know it's not for everybody, and that's okay, but for me, it has been the best thing. They have changed how I view myself, how I view the world. They've made me better. I'm gonna cry, I love them so much. I love those two little squishy human beings so much. And when somebody is mean to you on the internet, you just look at them and you're reminded of why it's so important. And you have a bad day, you just get down on the floor with them and you read a book, and they just melt your heart. Oh my God, I can go on and on and on. I'm running out of time. I had surgery 2 weeks ago, and like the way a 2-year-old will come up to you and go, "You feel better?" That's like, it's just the best thing in the world. So just don't take it for granted, and take lots of, just journal. Pete's so much better about journaling than I am, but those first 2 years were such a fog. Now I feel like we're kind of coming out of it, and they're like running around and negotiating already. I didn't realize negotiating started at 2. They're just brilliant, and it's just made me such a better, I think it's made me better at everything. A better partner, a better writer, a better human being, seeing the world through their eyes.
Well, Chasten, thank you for being visible. Thank you for being a role model.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.